Good. Huh?
Yeah.
I wasn't too noisy? What do you mean? Oh, yeah. Last night was pretty bad. But... Yeah. We're doing some crazy stuff.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Hope you're doing well. Better than my Lions.
Yeah, that's good.
Looking forward to a nice weekend, I hope. My verse for you today is Proverbs 18:21. In the NIV, it reads, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." In the NLT, it says, "Those who love to talk will experience the consequences. Eat its fruit." We have to be careful with our talk. This is both an Old Testament and New Testament principle. The Apostle James talks a lot about this issue, about what we do with our words. The Apostle Paul talks about whether or not our words are edifying or not. Anything we say is supposed to lift people up, not tear them down or kill, as is suggested here in verse 21. Matthew Henry says, "Many a one has been his own death by a foul tongue." So who might we kill? Ourselves. Or the death of others by a false tongue, by saying something untrue. On the contrary, many a one has saved his own life or procured the comfort of it by a prudent, gentle tongue, and saved the lives of others by a seasonable testimony or an intercession for them. Again, speaking up for them, edifying, using our words that way. So, something I have to work at, especially when I'm at soccer matches, because that referee, I just don't know what it is. My years of watching soccer, for whatever reason, I don't edify the referee generally. Got to work on that. Now, so watch our words. Use our tongue wisely. Proverbs 18:21. Questions from last time? What do you have for me? Christine.
So when it's talking, the article is talking about China, it says like the seemingly expected tariffs were being implemented at a higher 25% rate, and then they're initially 10%. Does that mean that they were going to be higher, but now they're not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so in the articles you've been reading for this class, there's a lot of talk about how the tariff talk, again, using their tongue, not edifying, definitely not edifying, China and the Trump administration. Is anything from the Trump administration? I'll be careful. First up, how they're using their words. Right now, it's all talk, but the important point to take away from that, from these articles, is that investors are moving on the talk, or what they think might happen. So as the talk changes from maybe 25%, maybe a 10% tariff, it causes markets to move in anticipation of what might be the economic impact or the financial impact of such a move. So the key way to read that section of the article is there's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty in financial markets creates volatility. All right, how does that relate to what we're doing? We're doing time value of money concepts right now. And when we do that, one of the key inputs to a time value of money principle are those future cash flows. What are going to be those future payments? So we have to make assumptions or forecasts about the future. And that section of the article that you're talking about is just that. Investors are trying to anticipate what cash flows will be like in the future. And so they're changing their valuation today based on changes in the C's, those cash flows in the future that they think might be true. If the tariffs are this high and the expected payments are so high, vice versa. Good. Other questions? Very good. Let's review some principles, specifically that of the additive property. And then I've got a few time value of money problems for you. So in this example, we had a series of future payments. As I talked about on Wednesday, this the way this series looks is very similar to how bonds look, which we're going to study next week. So I'm using this as that example in order to help us better understand what you're going to be studying next week. So suppose you have an asset that is paying you $5 or $5 million, how many zeros do you want to put on there, for each of 5 periods. And then when this contract is over, you're going to get your principal value amount, or you're going to sell the asset, whatever way you want to think of it, for $100. So your final payment then is $105. What's that asset worth today? Well, it depends, most importantly, on this input. That being, what's your opportunity cost? Remember in your economic fundamentals. Where could my capital be otherwise? Another way to think of this is, how much should I pay for this asset that's going to have this series of cash flows, given that I could take my capital somewhere else and invest it at this interest rate? So at an interest rate of 3%, this asset has a present value, adding up or summing up all the future payments present values, of about $109. So we can see that pattern when we use a spreadsheet. We don't have to. We could do the calculation first as the $5 annuity, and then take the $100 5 years from now and just figure out the present value of that, add them together then, and get the value. Or in a spreadsheet, spread it out and then sum up the present value of each one. So that's why I asked you to kind of practice that with the spreadsheet. Some of you might have, just used calculators, write them down, fine either way. But the spreadsheet's value is in seeing the cash flows and seeing their individual present worth and then adding them up for the last one. All right. The key principle we've been talking about, that opportunity cost, is a key factor. If the opportunity goes up, the present value falls. If the opportunity cost falls, not one, the present value rises. So again, we started at 3%. We had 109 value. If opportunity costs, if yields are higher elsewhere, the present value falls to about $92. And if they're lower elsewhere, the present value rises. So that's the key factor into this analysis. There are 3 altogether. Higher cash flows to an asset, greater value. Higher interest rates, lower value, because that's my opportunity cost. Longer period of time, lower value, because again, that's an opportunity cost. I'm having to wait longer for it. So always think about those principles before you do the math. When you read the problem and see that the opportunity cost is going up or the length is getting longer, you immediately know what should happen to present values before you go about and do such a calculation. Questions? Okay, so we're studying the financial manager. So let's pretend this is a management class for a while. And we're going to group work, because I know that's all they do in management class, or at least most of the time, right? No? Not lots of group work. I've got five time value of money problems for you. Exciting. Find a group, 1, 2, for yourself, and take a look at these problems. I'll get all 5 up on the list. Work through them, and then we'll discuss it. Remember what we're doing here. We want to think about the principles first, and then do their value.
So we need, okay, so the future value is $770. And we need it in 6 years. How much, so we need to figure out, so if you earn 4% interest in your funds, how much money you need to invest today? So we need to find present value. We need to find how much money it would take to invest now at an interest rate of 4% to get to $770. So present value. Determinants, so the interest rate is 4%. Actually, I'm going to open up the one from class notes. Okay, so future cash flow is 770. Interest rate is 4%. 6 years. Shoot. Don't have the. Okay, what's the equation? PV. I got it written in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would it be 1 plus 0.04, or would it be 1 plus? Is it when you do like the thing where it's like 1 plus 3? Do you do 1 plus 4, or do you do 1 plus 0.04? Sorry, is it? Yeah, I just didn't know.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I wrote
Okay. Well, we'll do it that way. If you let us straight, then
Oh, 4.
and raise to 6 years, right? So then we have to cross the line. Because once we actually get that number, so it'd be 1 point. So whatever that number is. So let me sure this.
Because the cash flow is somewhere or 770.
So we're looking for what we're investing. So we're looking for present value.
Oh,
Or is that what it's worth?
so I need to put it in this. Yeah, that does make sense. So we've got 770
divided by that.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, it should be.
For 6 years.
Yeah. How much do you- Okay. What?
Oh. Yeah.
600 acres.
You have the calculator?
4%, 6 years. How long time? 4% is not very good.
If you're getting 4% on that
Rule
for 6
72
years,
divided by 32 divided by.
because you're getting the principal, you're getting 4% of this each year.
Well,
Let me try something. What would 4% of this be? Like, so this would be.
18 years.
Yes.
Yeah, 600. So you guys got?
I was like,
Wait, is that why you're struggling? I was like, goodness, you have the calculation. And I was like, what?
No, I would like to take a moment and get a high five from my fellow marketer on
I
that.
was like, what is going on?
Come on, accountant.
Hey.
Read the whole question.
I don't want to talk about.
You can just look.
I wrote it down. I just didn't. Okay.
Well, this is triple in value, 8%. Well, to double in value, 8%. It will double in value in 9 years, so it's no longer than 9 years. It's pretty close.
Triple in value.
Triple, you're gonna get future value. Let's go 13 years, so it's 4.5. So I'm just gonna go with last 40 or something, or 50 or something. That'd be my guess.
So let's see what like. Let me just.
So we can do the future values. So we know what the future
So
value
let's say in the column is 10 years here. Initial investment is triple value. If the investment earns 8%.
So we can do one of the equations.
So this is where like
Is it just the basic one, the present value one?
50,000.
So that would be okay. So present value is
That tells you what your present value is of it right now. You have the cash flow.
yeah.
The rate at the time.
Oh no, we're looking for
You
time.
don't know what time it is, so I think that these are future values. Because that way we know future value, we know present value. We know the rate, we know the time. And that's 1 over that to cancel that. So that was so yeah, it was over. So yeah, let's write out that one.
Yeah, guys, 3,000.
1 plus 8% or 0.08.
Great.
T is
Yeah, but you're looking for the T
because
instead.
it's a exponent. You have to put it.
Yeah. Imagine this is just the So wait, that's what you have to. So then, how do you give it that again? Or is that how you do it?
That's what you do.
That's the inverse. But then, how do you separate T is then?
Separate the variables. So we've got how much we need. 1 plus 3,000. And then
You have to do actually because you can't take that away until you
so then you just move to the other side, right?
Right.
1 over T times 1,000.
so you'd have to yeah.
T times 1,000.
Right. Okay. So it would be something. Right. So it would be like 3,000 over this right here. Right. No, over this 1 plus.
I don't think
Because this think of this whole thing as one variable.
Is it 1?
I think it is because like since you're doing 1,000 times that to just cross it out, or you know what I mean? You do just 1 to one side, 2 to the other. So then you would have that over 1 and then that equals 1,000. And then after that, she's already ahead of us. She's done.
You're done already? Yeah, we're we got 6 over. And so this is what
Yes, there is. The future value.
Yeah. We did the future value.
I am lost.
You
Get rid of T.
the one where it's like, because we knew the future value. No, we didn't know. No, we didn't know the future value. Because that's future value, that's 770 equals, we didn't know the present value. We had to figure out what we wanted to say in order to get that.
Because breathing on my heart.
So we can say 1.08. To the negative.
So now you gotta. I'm still saying 14 years. No, because one is I'm saying 15 years. So 9 to double, 7 to 6. So 6.
We'll just go for it. Yeah.
All right. Number 50. How much must be invested today in order to be 5 years? Per year, my first statement. 1 year from today, interest rate is 12%. Okay.
So why did you do that with multiply? Right? What do you future value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
No, it's per year.
But I thought you were cash.
So it should be 5.
It's not cash flow, it's future value.
It's the same thing.
Different formula.
I just didn't do it. I know. It's the same.
Wow.
I just moved it. I don't know how, but it is.
That's the formula, but I don't know, like,
Nice.
again,
No, you
I
don't.
don't know how to get
Maybe it's wrong.
rid of that, how to, what to do about it. 5 years.
Because it's cross multiplying.
I mean, I can,
I think so.
oh
Narrow it
wait,
down.
isn't
Cash flow.
that, it would be raised to 1/5, right? Because that's what it is, the negative 1 over whatever it is.
We're gonna be realistic here. We can't.
You guys going up?
Oh, we just kind of gave a ballpark estimate of what we thought.
We logically went through it.
I think it's going to be about 16 years.
Don't ask us where we can't work that number.
If I had to give Aaron Rodgers, like, as his marketing finance right now, because that's a thing.
I mean,
Oh, she's already passed it. She's like, skip. I didn't like it.
What do you do with that?
I can do it in Excel, but not that. Just probably.
12%.
Do you have to like, expect?
Raise to the 1.
Wait, shouldn't
So I
the,
can take that to
when this is right now, shouldn't the future value be 3,000 and then the present value?
divide by the 1.
Yeah. I
So times 1,000, right? That's the cash flow. Cash flow is 1,000.
Yes.
So I just
No.
yeah, I was like, that's what I thought. It's not going to do that for me.
It's worth a try.
Oh, what? No. Back in. Stop it.
So, Chris,
Huh.
how's number 3 coming, man?
Yeah.
We're getting a number. But
Number.
we gotta do this
Taking us
piece
to the
by
next century.
piece. So
My number's taking us into the next century.
It might be.
my number might not even exist yet. Can't guarantee that it's the right number, but it's a number already.
Or less than 8%.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Know that much.
That's it. Wait, why is it going to be negative? I did, okay, so I did 1.12 to the to the 1/5, and that gave me that.
Okay.
But if I do 1 minus that, wait, no, I have to divide that first by 1.2.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, what you're doing. I like it.
I like the initiative.
See, I'm learning my managerial skills here of being a good leader and working with people and encouraging.
It's still gonna be.
Just throw a negative on the other side.
It's a negative annuity. You have to actually take out money in order to make money.
Do you guys remember that accounting question we had where I missed the math by like 600 or something like that?
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
We were like,
Because we were like, how much is this asset worth? And it was like, it's worth negative amount. We've lost money by owning this asset.
Yeah, Dr. Sweet.
I just loved that at the beginning of the year where she was like, if you guys don't know what this is, why are you even in this class?
Everyone
I don't see what you're talking about. Okay, no. Okay, so 1.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
So a couple more minutes.
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing. I just don't know how it happened.
Is that 2? Wait, is that 2?
That's not the whole thing,
No,
but
that's 3.
this is 3. I'm still kind of getting there.
Getting 5 yet?
Oh.
Oh, I'm just trying to remember. It's really terrible. First one was accounting.
We didn't. I've been trying to, but every time it keeps coming out as a negative number.
I have the equation, but no.
Okay, this is what I have for the point. We got 1 minus.
What is the annuity work on?
That's a different. Don't worry about that. This is what this is what you're looking at right here. Yeah. That's the annuity formula.
I'm not write that down.
So it's probably when you're sleeping.
We didn't. No.
Yeah, 1.8.
No, that's not that.
Oh, it's the.
No, because that's
Big one.
just what I got for this. Like whatever this.
This is what I
Oh,
wrote.
that one. Oh, okay.
Alright, so we know 1 is 608. 2 is 16 years?
Oh yeah, that's guaranteed.
Yeah, 16 years is what we said. 3. Yeah. 4. We know it's under 8%. 5. We're waiting on the yeah, so you're doing fine. Yeah, it's not involved.
I know, but I'm doing the second one. I'm waiting for one.
He's winning the
Year
blue track
1,
answers.
year 2, so the time period changes. So the time period for the 1, you have to put 1 year, and then the 2 now, the time period is 2 years, you know?
Okay.
So look. I'm doing this
For 1.
for 2 right now.
Oh.
Dang it. So I'm doing it 2 divided by. Oh, there it is.
Is this gonna be?
My rate will be lower.
All right, let's gather back in and talk through these questions. So the point of this exercise was not to get you worked up, but it's to, maybe that happened. The point of the exercise is to get you thinking through the principles of time value of money. As I've been saying a couple times now, before I start doing the math, I want to think about where the answer should be. So let's start doing that with the first question. So 6 years from now, I'm going to need 770 bucks. If I earn 4% on my money, do I need to invest 770 today? No. All right, I haven't done any math yet. I know the answer, quote unquote answer, is going to be less than 770. So a couple ways I could have gone about this. I could have taken that first example I gave you and created a spreadsheet or a table. Here's so much money earning 4%. How much do I have at the end of year 1? Here's how much I have at the end of year 2, so forth. And then just kept changing that value until the ending number, year 6, ended up being 770. All right, so here's again where a spreadsheet might help you. So if you did back on Monday when I first gave you that 100 bucks for 5 years, what does it end up being at the end of 5 years? If you had created that spreadsheet, you could have done that problem right in that spreadsheet right away. And just added another row for the 6 years and plugged and chugged, as we say, until you got the 770. Because you know the principle. I don't have to start with 770. I start with less, I get more, and I work through that. So there again is an opportunity to use spreadsheets, and why I've encouraged you. You're not required to. We can just do the algebra here. We can just do the math. But that again illustrates how those spreadsheets can help you. All right. Before I go to the answer, what about number 2? All right. I could have done the same thing again. The same spreadsheet could give me that answer. I just keep adding rows until I get, and then changing the interest rate until I get the amount for. I think it's about 14%. So again, I know the principle though. I know the principle that of what I'm trying to get there for. All right, I'm going to get 1,000 per year for 5 years. Do I need 5,000 bucks? No, less. All right, so the present value of that payment is going to be less. I'm going to get 1,000 1 year from now, another 1,000 2 years from now. Those $2,000 payments are not worth today 1,000 each. They have to be discounted. So I know again I'm going to have a value less than 1,000, even though I'm going to be collecting 5,000. All right. The number 4 is related to number 2. So in number 4, the value isn't quite double. So so we're not going to be out as many years as we were in the first one. We're going to be less years, and so but it's not quite doubling on the 4. So one handy rule of thumb is called the rule of 72. If you divide 72 by the interest rate in percent form, you get roughly how long something takes to double. So you might have used that little shortcut about the principle to do that one. All right, and the last one, here's a payment of $6,000, 1, 2, and 3 at 8%. Is it worth $6,000? No, because each thing, again, is worth less in present value amounts today. So that's, again, the principle that I need to know. For this problem, though, I can't use an annuity formula because the payment isn't constant. So I've got to use the additive principle. I know that before I do any math, again, because I see that it's not a constant payment. So those are the things you're trying to look for before you sit down to do the calculation. Questions on those before I go to the answer? All right, so present value equals future value, or the future cash payment, divided by 1 plus the interest rate. So I need about $608 when I'm earning 4%, the compounding effect on there. So, no algebra, just doing the calculation for it. And the second one, I've got to do some algebra. I've got an exponent. Couple of ways you could have done it. You could have plugged and chugged until you got the correct number of years. I could use the same formula here from number 1. I could put 3,000 future, 1,000 present, and then keep doing the calculations for it. So this is a future value 3, 1, solving for t. Very similar to the algebra we did when I reviewed the math class for you earlier this semester. I never do that. I always use a spreadsheet, and then I'll just keep changing the t until I get the value that I'm looking for. So that's the algebra, but it's not required for a financial manager to do that algebra for. Everybody knows what I mean by setting up a formula and then plugging and chugging kind of approach. Okay. Number 3. So this is the annuity formula that I showed back on Monday. So you don't have to do it that way. You could spread it out. 1,000 one year, 1,000 second year, 1,000 third year. You could spread it out and then just find the present value of each one and add them up. So if you want to write something down today, write down the answer and then we'll try again to get to that answer. Here's another algebraic approach for number 4. So I know it's 9 years away. I'm using the same formula. The future value is 1,900, present value is 1,000. I don't know R. I got an exponent in there, so I got to get rid of it. But I don't have to do the algebra. I could have, again, put that and just kept trying different interest rates until I got the 1,900 future value or the 1,000 present value, which either way you want it to go through. So it's about 7%. All right. If you didn't get that, try it again at home. Finally, the last approach is the additive principle, which I already said. And so I'm using the same formula, but discounting each different cash flow and then adding them up. So there's 6,000 payments, but they're only worth today $5,000 because the opportunity cost is 8%. So let me emphasize this again. I don't have to use all those formulas. I don't have to sit around and think what formula to do. If I know this principle and I know the additive principle, or accept that as fact, I can use that same approach to solve all 5 of these problems, even though they ask a different question. All right, how many seniors in the class? Almost half of you. Guess where these questions came from? Yeah. So these are the type of time value money questions you might see on the ETS exam. Yearly, there's only 2 or 3 on that exam on this problem, but they had a number of ways you can do it. On that problem, that test, they're multiple choice, so you kind of narrow down using your principles which one's going to be right before you try to do any math on it. Go ahead, Brady.
Can you go back to 3? I missed the answer.
What was the answer on 3? Who had it? 3,600.
Did you get that one too?
I think we either got it spot on or we were very close.
Okay, so let me reiterate. This is all I needed to know to do all 5 of those problems. I had to manipulate it differently. If I'm using a spreadsheet and I have that formula in there, I just enter the variables that I know and figure out the one I don't know by adjusting that until I get the right answer. That's what financial managers generally do. What I've seen. There are some out there that love to do the math. There's some out there that have scientific calculators and like to do that stuff. But most of the time, they're just using some kind of spreadsheet and some version of that formula in the additive principle to find values. All right. So again, the additive principle, I showed you as we started today, so now I'm off. Go back to the 3% we were at. So this series of payments is using the additive principle to discount each of those cash flows to find the present value of assets today. That's exactly what a bond contract looks like, that series of payments. And that's our topic for next week. We're going to take time value of money principles that we've been doing and apply them to the bond market. So I have one reading for you from today's Wall Street Journal on the bond market. And again, from today's Wall Street Journal, very similar to the article you read earlier this week on what's going on to cause investors to buy or sell, demand or supply, whichever way you want to think about it, bonds to the market. As they change their demand or change their supply, as they change their willingness to purchase or change their willingness to sell, they affect the price of the bond. The yield on the bond changes because that price has changed. The cash payments, the series that we're finding the present value of, doesn't change because that's contractual. So we're going to use the additive principle, those series of cash flows that we just looked at. We're going to use that on Monday to study this market. Practice those problems at home. Type in practice time value of money if you want. You'll get thousands of these questions in different versions. It's just practice that use, and particularly the use of this this formula. And we'll see you on Monday.
Yeah. Oh. I know, right? Not that I've already had enough today. Yes. You know?
What? Sorry.
I definitely need practice.
Yeah.